All right. Hey, folks, welcome to Review Writing and Delivering More Effective Feedback. I'm Joseph Steet from Buffalo, New York. I'm that one. I'm pointing at my screen, even though you can't tell because you can only see my screen. I'm that one, not that one. That's my child. He is also named Joseph Sweeney Steet. All right. If you did not know, I like reviews. This is a infographic of Judge App reviews submitted in 2018 when the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, one were regions and two also had a contest to write reviews. I wrote 457 in that year. It was a lot. I worked really hard on it. I'm pretty proud. That's why I'm bringing it up. But it's not actually that hard to write reviews. A lot of people think it's daunting, but it's pretty straightforward. But what a lot of people don't really pay attention to is how to do it more effectively. So here's some of the 11 herbs and spices of Steet's secret to review writing. So first, let's talk about good and bad feedback. And I'm referring to the feedback itself. I'm not using bad feedback as a dysphemism for area for improvement feedback. It is specifically feedback that is bad. All of these come from reviews that I have received. Rules knowledge, that was the entire statement. There's not, a preceding or a following sentence. There's no context. Was this a strength? Was this a weakness? Somebody else said, whenever I needed you, you were available and ready to work. This has some context to it. You can tell this is probably a pretty good thing to say. I recommend them as a player for any Magic event. This has no relevance. So, I'm not sure why somebody would feel the need to say it. Generally, you knew what you didn't know and weren't shy about asking for help. This is good. There's some context. There's some strengths being highlighted. And in round 6, you moved the pairings board. This could be good or it could be bad. You don't actually know, and you're not sure what they were trying to tell you, because that's the entirety of everything they said. So there's 4 steps of good feedback. Step 1 is your observation. What did you notice? Step 2 is their context. Why did they do that? Step 3 is your need. Why is this being discussed? And step 4 is your behavioral request, how you would like them to proceed. Most people have encountered the 4 steps of good feedback at various points. It might not have been as obvious to you, but here's an example that most people have been familiar with. Step 1, your observation. Did you throw a trident? Their context. Yeah, I stabbed a man in the heart. Your need, you're probably wanted for murder, and then your behavioral request, you should find yourself a safe house, lay low for a while. For those that don't know, that's from Anchorman, and I consider this slide to be the greatest contribution I have made to the Judge program. All right, observation. It's hard to give feedback. Thank you. Somebody said they liked that. Observation. It's hard to give feedback if you don't observe something. So take notes. As long as it's not detracting from your tasks, you can't take too many notes. If you've seen me at an event, you have, on average, seen me writing stuff down. I go through about 4 or 5 notebooks a year, and that is like the notebook is full. But if something went worse than I expected, I write it down. If it went better, I write it down. If it just went differently, I write that down. Differently is also a very interesting one, because certain times, it won't necessarily be important that it went differently, but it's good to keep that in mind. I lost my brain on the good example because there's 2 cats on my couch now. All right, so I'm going to move on and then hopefully come up with a better example for differently. Oh, yeah, here's a good example for differently is, I noticed you put your pen in your right pocket instead of your left pocket. Yeah, you don't need to tell somebody about which pocket they put something into. Yeah, that was my good example. It's 11 p.m. and I have a 1-year-old child. I'm a little tired. All right, context. Oh, let me fix the card. Pages context now. Oh, audio fail in the example. Okay, so to repeat the example, when something goes, I'm going to go back real quick. So for something going differently and you don't need to discuss it is where the difference is completely irrelevant. Like if you are talking to somebody and they put their pen in their right pocket instead of their left pocket, you don't need to bring that up. You can just move on and ignore which pocket they're putting stuff into. All right, so context, and then I'm going to turn this Mage's contest into a Mage's context. So feedback is a conversation, not a speech. Ironically, I'm largely just giving a speech about feedback, but feel free to communicate back to me. I'm reading the messages that people are sending me. An example of something going differently that is good. Just as a usual example, it's during a DQ investigation. If somebody asks a question you weren't expecting them to ask, and you wanted to ask question A, they asked question B, you can certainly, there's no one right way to conduct a investigation. So other people might be asking questions that you would not have asked, and not asking questions you would have asked, and you can both still get to the correct conclusion, ideally. So feedback, conversation, not speech. Sometimes there is context you don't have, which can make things better or worse. So if, for example, sometimes a judge was told they had to do something in a specific way, so they're not your target for the feedback. You can still share it with them to be like, hey, I think this should be done this other way because it's better. As an example that will come up later, there was a two-headed giant event where the TO insisted that every team have their name called out for the seed-all instead of a pairings going up or a seeding going up, because they very much did not want any two-headed giant teams to sneak in and get free product. And there were 84 teams, so this led to the judge just yelling out names for several minutes. The judge got a lot of feedback about how dumb that was. And they were like, yeah, I know it was dumb. It wasn't my call. I was told I literally had to do it that way by the TO. So yeah, it's feedback for not that person, but it is still feedback. And then I was told X, but decided to do Y. We'll expand into a lot of questions, such as like, were you being actively insubordinate? Did you have some reason to think Y would be better than X? But yeah, all right. And then your need. I'm going to highlight why the Lonesome Unicorn card. It's got the word need on the adventure side. So why is this feedback relevant? There should be an advantage. Otherwise, you're just stating what is or isn't. A great example of, the not relevant part would be which pen they're putting their pocket, which pocket they're putting their pens in. You don't need to tell somebody to do that differently, assuming that they actually have a pocket on that side. But yeah, there should always be. Okay, that was not for me. All right. So yeah, then the behavior request. Now that we know what happened, why, and why something else is preferred, you need to offer guidance for the way forward. What would you have them do next time? Like, what's your wish here? So you want, for specific strengths, you need to highlight what makes something a strength. And there can be two different kinds. There's superlative, and then there's also expectations. So for example, John Alderfer is one of the best logistics people in the world. And so he's very great at every logistics possible problem. Versus if you had some newcomer and they happen to be more or less keeping up with John Alderfer, that would be far beyond your expectations. And also excessively superlative. Alternatively, if you have a new L1, you would not your expectations would be a lot lower. So it's just, if they are exceeding your expectations, just make sure it's clear why. Also specify what exactly they did that was great. There's two different things here. There's their approach and there's their effect. My favorite example of effect is the time two players were angrily yelling at each other, and then my phone went off, which was Circus Afro, and the two players stopped arguing to ask if that was Circus Afro, and then both were like, wait, you know what Circus Afro is? I love Circus Afro too. Okay, I'm going to stop arguing with you, and I guess we'll play some Magic. And it completely de-escalated an absolutely out of control situation. But I don't, on the whole, recommend randomly playing Circus Afro at tournaments. It is my timer. It's the noise my phone makes, so that was the end of their time extension. So there was relevance to a noise happening there, but Circus Afro specifically did not need to be. I believe a link to Circus Afro just got tossed in the, yeah, I'll play Circus Afro real quick just so that everybody knows what this noise is.
All right, animals, you may be your...
Actually, I'm going to do that differently in that I'm going to just make my phone play it instead of using that. Morning alarm. Yeah. The two cats on the couch just straight up slept through that because I play Circus Afro a lot in this house. With the alarm every morning, and I don't always get up on the first try. All right. So alternatively, sometimes things could go very poorly, but their approach was great as a not overly positive, but very real world scenario. There were some very great Grand Prix Magic Fest schedules that were made up, and then all those events got canceled because of COVID. So the approach was great. The outcome sort of irrelevant there because of things beyond control. However, that you want that person to do that approach exactly the same way every time, and just sort of hope that the world doesn't crumble in the meantime. So areas for improvement need to be actionable. You may have noticed specific strengths, actionable areas for improvement. I like alliteration. So there's multiple kinds of area for improvement feedbacks. There's something called, I call it percentage point. It's just small improvements. It's not like you're doing this terribly. It's how to take something from, I would normally say like a 91 to a 93, but a lot of people don't like imaginary numbers being, I mean, it's not mathematically imaginary, but just random numbers being made up and used in the rating of judges because they feel it's like particularly harsh a lot of the time. So, you know, I'm making up the numbers 91 and 93, but a lot of people hearing that tend to think that they are being judged at precisely a 91, and that seems extremely hypercritical. Again, there's also the different approach feedbacks. That's where it's, you're doing it this way, I do it that way. This is just another tool for you to consider. As a great example, that would be asking, you know, which player you start asking questions of during an investigation in, say, a two-headed giant match. You can, you know, you got 4 options. There's a couple of different ways to go. You can start at the table, you can separate them. Depending on which kinds of things you're trying to get to, you might have a different plan. And then there's also shortcomings, and that's where they did something that generally would be considered wrong or subpar. Great example would be if they, you know, cut the match slips poorly and like the table numbers are all cut off. You need to correct that so that they can figure out how to do it better and not in a detrimental way. And so in order to make this actionable, you have to both explain the relevance and provide a path forward. So for example, with the match slips being cut poorly, you have to say, you know, okay, the scorekeeper needs the table number on the match slip. They, you know, that's how they know where these players are from. And then provide a path forward is say, line this up better. If you notice that you goofed up, ask the scorekeeper to print out the match slips again. So here's this chart of feedback and compassion. The vertical axis is how much you care about the person, and the horizontal axis is how much you are providing them feedback, basically. And now to oversimplify and hyperbolize these, manipulative insincerity is I just say that you're great because I hate you. And this is, you're not great. You goofed something up or you got some room to improve, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm just going to say you're great so that you don't get any better and you just stay a bad or a not optimal judge over time. Ruinous empathy is I don't say you're bad because I love you and I don't want to make you upset. So I can't bring myself to hurt your feelings. So I'm not going to tell you how to get better. Obnoxious aggression is I just say you're bad because I hate you. That's where, the point of the feedback is basically being done more to make this other person feel bad and prove that you're better, as opposed to helping them grow. And radical candor is I say how you're bad because I love you. And that's where you're happy to help this person grow and develop, and you're going to help them along this course. All right. So delivering negative feedback. There's an expression called "it's cruel to be kind," which is very similar to ruinous empathy. You are neglecting their growth to spare their feelings. And then what's that band? Letters to Cleo. Letters to Cleo has the song "Cruel to Be Kind" that mentions you've got to be cruel to be kind, which is sort of the radical candor. You're having an unpleasant conversation with somebody in order to help them grow. That notably does require rapport, because you're going to be saying some stuff that is pretty difficult for them to hear a lot of the time. As a great personal example, I'm an L3 now, and I made L3 in 2019, but in 2015, I wrote a self-review to try and advance to L3, and it was awful. It was just, everything about it was terrible. And a bunch of judges were giving me ruinous empathy and or manipulative insincerity. And they were telling me like, oh yeah, this will get approved by the committee. You're on your way, all this good stuff. And then I sent it to Jared Silva for him to take a look at, and he absolutely tore it apart appropriately. He wrote me a response twice the length of my self-review, explaining how I did not understand anything that I was talking about and was nowhere close to where I thought I was. It was a tremendously unpleasant email to read, but it was super important, because if he doesn't write that email, I don't know if I ever make L3, because nobody would have, theoretically, somebody would have just told me to stop judging or something like that without that major course correction, because I want to emphasize this, I was dead wrong about virtually everything. It was really, really bad. It's that Dunning-Kruger effect where, I had just enough knowledge to think I knew everything, complete idiot, but he managed to set me right. And yeah, if he didn't do that, things would have gone a lot worse for me. So communicate. The first discovery of your feedback should not be the review. If it's feedback that can impact the day, deliver it promptly. For example, they got a rules question wrong, they cut the slips wrong. I'm going to skip to that last paragraph. Feedback is similar to a missed trigger policy. Acknowledge it before it becomes relevant. That's a really good rule to live by, because there's lots of stuff where you don't need to hash it out with a person at the time, because you're at an event and the needs of the event should generally be coming first. Obviously, major personal issues are the overarching thing. For example, if you are not feeling well, you go take care of yourself. Other people can take care of the event. So if it's not something that can impact the day anymore, wait till later. For example, if your team meeting in the morning was terrible, you don't need to beat up your team lead about it. You can just let it go for the rest of the day and then touch base with them later. If that's Sunday, you can touch base with them on Monday. If it's Saturday and they're leading again, you probably want to talk to them at the end of the day, or whenever sort of time becomes available. And then to reiterate from earlier, feedback is a conversation, not a speech. So just make sure you actually communicate with the person about your feedback. Oh, right. Yeah. Not excommunicate, communicate. All right. So writing the review, this one's a lot. It sounds pretty simple. It's just really hard to make yourself do it. The best review is the one you submit. A lot of people like to rework wording and stuff like that. There's a family friend that ended up never finishing his PhD because he kept rewriting his thesis for like 20-ish years, and then like got kicked out. I'm not sure it was actually 20 years. I just know it was so long that he got kicked out of the program just because he couldn't ever finish it. And he probably could have turned it in the state it was and gotten his PhD, but certain people, if you keep trying to fix things, sometimes you never finish. As a great example, George Lucas does not consider Star Wars: A New Hope to be finished. There's not a copy in the Library of Congress because he refuses to provide them one because he's, quote, not done with it yet. For example, he added McClunky this last year. McClunky has kept Star Wars: A New Hope out of the Library of Congress. So also, when it comes to review writing, always share the draft with them before submitting, because I'm not great with words sometimes. So for example, I didn't want to say that a judge scolded me, so I said they unleashed the hounds on me, and they did not like that. They thought that seemed a lot worse than scolded. That seemed like they were just screaming at me on the event floor, which was not true. They were just like, sternly reminding me to, be better about something. So writing the review part 2. I really like to use talk to text. That's a large part of how I wrote so many reviews in 2018, was that you just turn on talk to text. You just have basically a conversation. You do absolutely have to copy edit it. Tuskegee Syracuse is what got written down when I said SCG Syracuse. So yeah, you gotta, sometimes it's gonna make 0 sense to you when you're reading it. So that's really why you have to copy edit it. Hopefully you can figure it out and then make it back into the sentence. And when I say on average, only the recipient will read it. Sometimes not even them, but almost certainly never anyone else. It is extremely rare for anybody besides the writer or the recipient to be reading a review of someone. So you should really be addressing it to the subject. It's Brian, not you did this. Brian, you did this, because you're talking to Brian and they're the only person who's going to read it approximately at most. So, spoiler, this is the two-headed giant story from earlier. This is just some feedback. And then, this would be good feedback, but the decision was the TO's insistence. But this is exactly the review that I received, at least the paragraph. And yeah, they put in the context, they put in all the stuff. They just skipped step 2, which was my context of, yeah, I know this was dumb. I didn't want to do it. They told me I had to because they were really worried about somebody stealing like 6 packs. So the difference details make. All right, so these are 2 different reviews of the same problem incident happening from the same team lead. And this is very specifically the exact same problem, not like this happened on separate days. This is two people's recounting of the same event. All right, so the USC minor situation where your communication issue with your team led to not giving USC minor penalties. For future events, I encourage you to work on your communication. One of the key things is generally to not guess what people understood, but clarify situations with them. This is, reasonable, but you're not, like, if you don't remember from the event, you might not know exactly where this went awry or how this went awry. So here's the other version. While doing team swoops at the start of round 1, your team found obscenities written on the modern and legacy players' ancient grudges from their sideboard. You instructed your judges to confirm with red shirts that they wanted UC minor assessed for this and to then assess. Your team was less experienced than how you were treating them, so various members, 1, went to TO staff instead of a head judge. For those that don't know, Channel Fireball staff wear red shirts as well. 2, revealed the card to all the opponents while talking to the players, so everybody knew the ancient grudges were in both the modern and legacy players' sideboards. 3, didn't tell the players of any infraction. 4, didn't write the penalty on the back of the match slip. And 5, didn't instruct the players to acquire replacements. So really, this fell apart in almost every way possible. These are all steps that we take for granted, and in the future, you need to build experience level into your first contacts or team briefings whenever it's an unknown quantity. Then you also need to be mindful of this experience level and give instructions in appropriate detail. So, yeah, basically, the other version of what happened here is some of the judges asked a Channel Fireball redshirt if this should be UC minor, and they just sort of got a shrug. And then they were like, okay, I guess it's not UC minor. So they just abandoned everything, even though, and then those were the ones that got to the table first. The people that went to a Burgundy, kids kind of waking up, but probably not. So the people that went to an actual Burgundy were told, yeah, UC minor, and then went to the table and were being told, there's some sort of confusion because somebody else had already done it. So they didn't do anything. So does anybody have any questions? And if you don't have any questions, I brought my own to continue on with this. My child has questions. None of that's this channel. Oh my God, there's so many messages. Why have I not seen any of these messages? Oh my God, there's so many messages. All right. I'm reading so many messages. I'm going to read the message. Or, no, I'm not going to read the messages out loud. Yeah, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good is also a more common, more in general, more broadly applicable version of this. Thank you, Ben. I did try to make this thorough. That's one of the reasons why I added my own questions at the end. Yeah, Burgundy is the head judge of a large event, not Ron Burgundy, the one who gave all that great feedback in slide 2 or 3, whatever, one of the early slides. I am disproportionately proud of that slide. I'm very, very happy with it. Sure. So the 4 steps to establishing, all right. So Maria Alex Chernoff, here's the 4 steps of good feedback, which also answers Ben's question about a quick overview. So the 4 steps of good feedback. Your observation, what did you notice? Their context, why did they do that? 3, your need, why is this being discussed? And 4, your behavioral request, how to proceed. So yeah, those are the 4 steps to generating good feedback. And most people have encountered this in the form of your observation. Did you throw a trident? Their context. Yeah, I stabbed a man in the heart. 3, your need. You're probably wanted for murder. And then the behavioral request. You should find yourself a safe house, lay low for a while, which is the aftermath of the news team's grand melee in Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy. Let's see here. Yeah, I was in the other one instead of Ivan's, so I actually don't know what Ivan said in the morning. But yeah, it's like the 4 steps thing I got from Ivan. I added the Anchorman parallel myself. But yeah, so basically you need to know like what happened, the why did they do that. You're not necessarily going to be asking them like directly, why did you do that? But you're going to build the context because the why did you do that can seem super accusatory a lot of the time. That's the reason why you try and avoid why questions. So you're trying to build context without sounding accusatory. The why is this being discussed? That one is really a question you're asking yourself, so I don't think that comes off. I'm mispronouncing Petrovich's first name, so I'm gonna stop saying his first name. His last name is Petrovich, correct? I think I'm pronouncing his last name correct. I might be pronouncing his last name wrong too. It's just a disaster. But yeah, and then the how to proceed is what you're asking of them going forward. How you're like asking them to change things. And so if it's a specific strength, if it's strength, you want to be specific and highlight exactly what they did that you like and would like them to keep doing and suggest other people do as well. If it's an area for improvement, it needs to be actionable in that you tell them, a way forward, not just, oh, investigate better, end of feedback. Nobody can get anything really from that. It needs to be something with clear instructions and multiple steps. Well, not necessarily multiple steps, but at least one step. I'm not sure what's going on with my microphone. All right. Ben, maybe it's somehow the reception. All right. All right. Does anybody else have any questions before I bring up my own store-bought questions? All right. Well, if you do, I'll notice them. I'm not sure why I stopped getting notifications from the track B chat. I keep getting notifications from the track A chat and thinking my notifications are on. So why do we give feedback? To show that we are better than the recipient, to help the recipient improve, to make the recipient feel stupid, or toothbrush? Various numbers of points assigned here. Toothbrush is just the cop out, and also I wanted more than 3 options. All right, when do we give feedback? ASAP, interrupt them, whatever they are doing to tell them. After an event in person. C, before it matters again. D, way after the event, by email. Or E, while brushing your teeth. And points. So B, C, and D are all good answers. I obviously think C is the best answer. Yeah, but if you tell them feedback while they're brushing their teeth, they might not be able to converse back. All right, and then to whom do we give feedback? The subject, no one, everyone else, or D, toothbrush. Some points. For those that don't know, in the company picnic episode of The Office, Michael and Holly kept struggling to come up with four questions or 4 answers for each question for Slumdunder Mifflin. So they just kept adding toothbrush to the end of everything, or brushing their teeth. So that's what this joke is being stolen from poorly. But as an important note, feedback you don't give to the subject is just gossip. So a couple of people have received comparatively peculiar messages from me where I say, hey, I heard this about you. I don't have much more context, but basically some people were gossiping about this, about Judge X messing up something. And I made sure that feedback got to them, even though it was super awkward to deliver it, because I feel it's a tremendous disservice for people to know somebody did something wrong and that person isn't one of them. Somebody's typing, so I'm going to see what they type. Oh yeah, it's never not awkward. Like, so because usually they have questions, and I'm like, I don't have more information, and I'm also not comfortable sharing who was gossiping. But yeah, like there was one where somebody was complaining about how terrible their team lead was, and so I looked up on the schedule who their team lead was, and then was like, hey, just so you know, member of your team was saying this, that, this other thing. And they were like, which one? How do I address it? And I was like, well, I'm not telling you which one, but you address it by probably not. I was like, I'm not sure if this is valid or not overall, but this was their perception, and they felt it so strongly enough that they were mentioning it to other people. So certainly they did not have a good day on your team. Whether this is your fault or their fault, somewhat ambiguous. That judge is, I think actually both of those judges are no longer judges, so it could have been blame on both sides. But it's like, if there's one thing I'm ready to do, it's be awkward. Several people are typing. Oh, so the no longer being a judge, not necessarily correlating to the problem there, but neither of them were receptive to feedback in general, is perhaps one way to phrase it. And so yeah, it's not that judging is not quite the shark that has to keep moving forward or it dies, but that is a somewhat frequent analogy. It's a little bit too harsh of a comparison, but generally, if you don't have a good time while you're judging, you're going to stop judging. And if you don't have if the people around you don't have a good time while you're judging, you're also somewhat likely to stop judging, is perhaps a better way to phrase the no longer being a judge. Is perhaps maybe there was blame on both sides for the team member having a bad day. I think I've got one more question. Oh yeah, how do we create feedback? Listen to other people's gossip, observe performance, talk to the subject, guess randomly, or brush your teeth. So the listen to other people's gossip doesn't really create feedback, but kind of can. But yeah, don't guess randomly. That has happened where somebody, like some judge got a review for an event they weren't at. Or like they got a review and they're like, I didn't work with you at this event. You were on deck checks. I was the floor team. Like, what are you talking about? I screwed up this deck check. I wasn't deck checks. Like, that's not so much guessing randomly, but you know, that was shots in the dark. Also, back when reviews were mandatory to maintain level, you got a lot of really bad reviews submitted on December 31st of each year. Yeah, the one that recommended me as a player in any Magic event was a December 31st review of an event in February. Yeah, it was a completely substanceless review. I actually passed it along to the RC to be like, this is nothing. Like, does this really count? And they're like, shrug, I guess. I guess it counts. Yeah, the protocols have changed since then. Yeah, I'd received another review previously that had oh yeah, let me go all the way back to the network. Oh yeah, for those that didn't see it, this is I'm Joseph Sweeney Steet now, and then also so is that guy, but I'm that one, not that one. In case you were wondering if a 1-year-old baby is giving this presentation, only from a maturity standpoint. Did a lot of reviews. Oh yeah, so rules knowledge. That was in the strengths. That was the entirety of the strengths paragraph. Was just the 2 words, rules knowledge. And I felt this was somebody who did not know how to give a review, because all they did was put rules knowledge and then they put one of the other suggested categories under area for improvement, and then another category in the comment section. That was it. And so they just didn't know what they were doing. So I gave them a lot of feedback on how to write a review, and they wrote a review later that was, perfectly fine. Had all sorts of context and stuff in it. But I consider the rules knowledge review to be nowhere near as bad as I recommend them as a player for any Magic event, because the player for any Magic event is an L2 who has the ability to make other judges. And I was like, this is a very peculiar and troublesome review to receive from an event 9 months, or no, yet like 9 or 10 months ago, in which I was playing, not judging. There's some typing happening for those wondering why I stopped talking. Oh yeah, that's annoying. Uh, Isaac gave a presentation. Uh, Feedback was some of your information was wrong. End of feedback without any contact info. So Isaac doesn't know what was theoretically wrong, and perhaps never will. I assume Isaac fact checked at some point. It's moot whether or not something was wrong. The point is the feedback itself. One of the more interesting reviews that I wrote in the past few years was I was talking with my team lead at the end of an event, and I said this was just the most straight down the line, absolutely my expectations met day I've ever had. Like you at no point like exceeded my expectations, and at no point came up short. So this was just an absolutely just like completely as expected day. So I was like, it's tough to give you any real feedback on this. And their challenge to me was, well, what could I have done to make it exceptional? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess. I was like, well, like this part, and so I went through all the categories that they judge team leads by for their performance, some of which are preparedness and adaptability and communication. And it's like, yeah, you can't really be, exemplary at communication if there's not something particular to communicate. Like, yes, we have our break at this round. We have our half break at this round. Like you told us stuff. There's not like a real fancy way to tell us. This is one of those things with like a pretty low ceiling and a bottomless floor. So just anytime that you interact with somebody, there's always something you can say to them that's feedbacky. It just, always kind of figure out what kind of context and what sort of stuff you're looking for. I mean, I play Magic sometimes. Yeah. I don't think I have anything more to add right now. I can sort of wax poetic about various things. I'm gonna leave the picture of me and my kid up because I like looking at. He's real cute. He gets that from his mother. Also, I wear the corn shirt frequently, not when I'm judging, but other times. So that's why I'm corn and he's corn. We're wearing crop tops. Yeah. Yeah, we had to cobble together the outfits. Yeah, if anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to answer more questions. They also don't have to be thought of now. If you think of something, tomorrow, whatever, feel free to message me. There are so many messages coming in from Track A chat. I'm not sure why I have it set to alert me at every message. I don't have it set to alert me for every message. Why is it alerting me? All right. So if I'm overhearing, like if somebody's telling me something that somebody else did poorly, I'm usually going to ask a lot of questions about it. Oh, like, oh, what, like, tell me more about what they did wrong, blah, 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 to try and get some specifics to turn it into actionable feedback for the subject. But sometimes it's literally been like I'm walking by and I'm overhearing some stuff and like it's not somebody talking to me. And in that case, it's like super awkward because I'm like, well, I'm not supposed to have heard this, but they were certainly saying it loud enough that I did. And then also, there's the other version of ask the person who is saying the feedback for more context. So if somebody is giving you third-party feedback, bear in mind they might not have context that you need, but hopefully just in general, try and assume it's true, because there's a phrase called perception is reality. If people felt you were doing something poorly, you arguably were, even if you weren't. A great example would be there was a player who I was disqualifying who poked himself in the eyes to start crying. And I just stone-faced it because I wasn't going to give him any sympathy. And it was actually Toby pointed out to me that this aesthetically looked real bad because there's a player bawling his eyes out, and I'm just standing there just glaring at him. And so it was like, okay, yeah, I don't want to give him sympathy, but like for the audience of everyone else in the room, I need to at least, seem like I care a little bit, because everybody else is missing my context. Yeah, they got an 18-month suspension. I mean, that's the only time somebody poked themselves in the eyes to start crying, but I imagine it happens worldwide a fair amount. Like it was real dumb. I was talking to them at the time. It wasn't like they did it secretly. I just watched them do it, and I was like, was like flabbergasted. I wasn't gonna not DQ them. Yeah, bear in mind that I judge a tremendous amount. So when you see these weird stories, it's partly due to just volume. I judged 111 consecutive weekends, which is more than 2 full calendar years. That does count shows that I had to go to as a vendor, which were something like 8. But at all of those, I did still get asked at least one rules question, so I count them. But yeah, it was like something like 2 weeks in 2016, every week in 2017 and 18, and then a couple of weeks in 2019 before I missed the 112th weekend. Yeah, at any future events, I'm going to have my wife with me, and probably not the child. The child will be getting babysat by the grandparents. But yeah, me and my wife will be happy to meet some people. Yeah, I'm also the judge that had the pizza problem. I'm going to put a picture of that in favorites. So the pizza call was at Atlantic City in round 7. I get called to a table, and the player says, "Judge, I have pizza." I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "No, Judge, I have pizza." I go, "You're allowed to have pizza. Is there something I can help you with?" And he goes, "I don't know where my deck is, and my deck box is full of pizza." Picture relevant. So I looked at this, paused for a minute, and go, "Okay, well, I think this is just textbook tardiness, but I need to call another judge because no one's going to believe me." And so I call for a judge. Abe Corson comes over. I give him no prep or no preface, and just let the player tell Abe that he has, pizza and doesn't know where his deck is. Abe just sort of stares at it for a second and then goes, "Okay, this is just textbook tardiness. You have 10 minutes to find your deck or a replacement." And so what ended up happening was the player had asked their friends to watch their deck while they went to the bathroom, and the friends thought he had dropped, so they swapped the deck out for a slice of pizza. And the player came back decided to play, and then was cardless and just had a slice of pepperoni pizza. They dropped, obviously. I haven't told that story in a solid like 18 months because of the pandemic. I'm rusty. I forgot all the parts about the player asking Abe and I if they should drop, and Abe and I looking at each other to be like, I mean, obviously the answer is yes, but we don't want to say it. I believe it has no mana value, so functional 0. Similar to Ancestral Recall, you can't cast the pepperoni, but if you need its mana value, it's 0. Cascade in the context of pepperoni makes me think more about Cascade dish detergent. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to leave this up, though. Oh, I had so many people in this chat. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I appreciate you all. I only saw like 4 people, and then I started screen sharing and didn't see how many people showed up.